Funny, excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Hannah. Thank you very much to all those who've been involved in organising this very impressively put together conference and for raising such an important contemporary theme for us to focus on today. Benjamin Franklin famously said, "They who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." Security that makes people more insecure, and anti-terrorism laws and courts that instill fear in whole communities, well, some days it feels a little like we're all living in that Vietnamese village that had to be destroyed in order to save it. Human rights defenders are by no means all lawyers. They are all who stand up for the rights of local communities, indigenous peoples, ethnic and religious minorities, victims of discrimination and poverty. They are trade unionists, journalists, lawyers, medics, whistleblowers, community activists, and the lone parent protecting her child's right to walk to school unmolested by bigots. Human rights defenders are under attack around the globe, from Russia's persecution of Greenpeace's Arctic 30, of which I hope you've heard, to the Marikana miners murdered in South Africa, from trade unionists executed with impunity in Colombia, to governmental and corporate death squads killing indigenous leaders in the Philippines, from Beijing to the Basque region, from Palestine to Punjab. Lawyers don't matter any more than other human rights defenders, but the oppression of lawyers provides a kind of barometer of human rights in general. All defenders need lawyers to help protect their lives and liberties, both in the courtroom and in the court of public opinion. Lawyers have a special duty to stand up and be counted on behalf of those targeted by repressive legislation and politically motivated prosecutions. When lawyers who do stand up are murdered with the complicity of the state, and when the state asserts that the interests of justice demand that justice be denied to their families, when those who collude in murder operate with impunity, what then? When lawyers who defend human rights defenders are themselves jailed for the crime of representing their clients, who is left to defend the defenders? It's appropriate that we meet here in Belfast to learn about and to stand up for lawyers defending human rights in the Basque Country, in China, Colombia, Russia, South Africa, India, Sri Lanka, Turkey, and elsewhere. And you're going to hear today from people who have long expertise in each of those conflict situations. Here, where the British government finally admits that its own agents colluded in the murder of Pat Finucane almost 25 years ago, yet that same government insists that the public interest requires that there should be no public inquiry. Where the interests of state are not the same as the interests of justice, then I suggest it is for the public to decide what is in the public interest. And my first encounter with the oppression of lawyers was in 1976, when I met some of the lawyers involved in the Baader-Meinhof trials in the Federal Republic of Germany, as it then was. Law after law had been passed restricting the rights of their clients to choose their lawyers and the rights of those lawyers to represent those clients. At their invitation, I travelled to Germany and observed that trial on behalf of the Haldane Society. I met with the lawyers, I reported back. On my return, I was interviewed by the BBC, a very shaking experience. And I suddenly realised that not all those nice, plummy-sounding voices were on our side. it taught me a thing or two about when and whether to engage with the media and how best to prepare yourself for that experience. I was in my early 20s, and I'm going to move now to an overview into which I will try to intersperse some of my experiences that may be of interest. And before I start, may I say I absolutely hate PowerPoints, and I'm very inept at them, so please bear with me when I try not to screw this up too bad. But I thought it would be helpful to start with an overview of the existing mechanisms that operate at the international, regional, and domestic levels to protect human rights defenders and lawyers in particular in times of conflict. And talk a little about the UN Special Rapporteur system, the UN Special Procedures system, while I set myself up and try to rescue myself. I was talking about the 1970s, none of these things existed at that time. Today, you have at the United Nations a Human Rights Council, which has a number of special rapporteurs who receive information, investigate governments, and report annually on the failures of governments to comply with international human rights law. I'm almost there. God, this is impressive. There is a special rapporteur on human rights defenders. There is a special rapporteur on the independence of judges and lawyers. And both of those have played a very impressive role internationally in helping to protect those who are trying to protect human rights. And this, what I'm going to do is, and I apologize for this, I have given the organisers a copy of this presentation, which has all of the information you need to contact human rights defenders, special rapporteurs, and all of their email contacts, so that we've got I was hoping that I might be able to create a tool that could be of some use to others rather than just a general confusion to myself. In particular, lawyers internationally, there are United Nations basic principles which spell out some of the most important aspects of lawyers' rights and duties, and of government's rights and government's duties to all lawyers. Particularly, and I brought with me a bunch of pamphlets at the back which have the entire UN basic principles on the role of lawyers. Of course, you can download these on the internet, but there's a bunch of booklets produced by an excellent organisation that I work with in the Netherlands called Lawyers for Lawyers. But in particular, I want to draw attention to number 17, where the security of lawyers is threatened as a result of discharging their functions. They shall be adequately safeguarded by the authorities. They shall be. Must be. It's a duty on governments. Number 18 is particularly important and a major problem for lawyers historically. Lawyers shall not be identified with their clients or their clients' causes as a result of discharging their functions. You're going to hear a lot about that today, because a typical way of neutralizing, intimidating, threatening legal defense is to target the lawyer, label the lawyer with his clients' or his presumed clients' beliefs and intentions. This was brought home to me. I practiced law in New York for 20 years, and at one stage I was asked to do a commentary on television on the diplomat court system, which I didn't like then, and I like even less today, because today any justification that originally may have existed for it is long gone and evaporated. But in, I think it was 1981, I appeared on television in the United States doing a very short, pithy critique of the Diplock court system, to which the Daily Hate Mail responded over here with a headline that says, "British lawyer goes on American TV to back IRA." And in fact, in the body of the text of what was written was a direct quote from me in which I said, I gave this commentary not to support any organisation, least of all the IRA. But the headline, of course, is what tells the story. And even over 20 years later, when I came back to England and saw old friends, oh yeah, you were working for the IRA in the States, weren't you? That's how it sticks with you. And number 20, lawyers shall enjoy civil and penal immunity for relevant statements made in good faith in written or oral pleadings in their professional appearances before a court, tribunal, etc. I was earlier this year with Virace, who you're going to hear from shortly, from the Basque country. We were together in a seminar in Amsterdam, and a colleague of ours from Turkey was there, very courageous lawyer, appeared in court a little while ago, challenging the right of the prosecutor to tell the court what is and what is not journalism, and what is and what is not advocacy for a supposed terrorist organisation. And he had the temerity to suggest that the prosecutor can't tell the court what is journalism. He's not qualified to do so. He has to call an expert witness. Well, for that, our colleague is now being investigated for making disrespectful statements to an official of the state. That's for his conduct in the courtroom. And you'll see lower down the right of freedom of expression and association. Again, a very important right when lawyers' organisations are targeted because of their perceived allegiance with or support for a particular political organisation that is out of favour, shall we say, with the powers that be. So these are some of the UN international principles that are out there. There are also very important regional mechanisms. Here in Europe, we are particularly better protected in theory than in other parts of the world, because we have not only the Council of Europe, which with its, of course, the European Court of Human Rights, which the British government, for some bizarre reason, seems to think is a bad thing these days. We have the Human Rights Commissioner, who has the specific responsibility to promote and protect human rights defenders in their work across Europe. We have the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which also has a human rights defenders institution. And we have European Union guidelines on ensuring protection for human rights defenders. So we should, in theory, be the best protected area of the world. And you'll be hearing from others as to the extent to which that claim has any basis at all. In the inter-American, in the Americas, North and South, there is a Human Rights Defenders Unit who has a rapporteur, and there is the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which offer, again, a forum to raise the death threats, the murders of human rights defenders in places such as Colombia, Honduras, and many others. In Africa, there is, again, a very important, on-paper protection, at the very least, a rapporteur on human rights defenders there. In Asia, nothing. There is no regional human rights organisation. There are many national human rights commissions, but there is no regional mechanism, although one has been under discussion for many years. Back in the 1970s, when I first started to engage in this sphere, there were very few NGOs. Of course, the venerable Amnesty International, there was the International Commission of Jurists, but today there is a plethora of organisations, because civil society and its role have grown massively in the past 40 years. So these are just a small sample of the many organisations, and I'm sure I can read several of your minds saying, well, why isn't my organisation up there? I ran out of space, I apologise. And today, of course, we have advantages that all of these organisations are producing reports on an annual basis, both internationally and regionally. You have the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights report here on human rights defenders. You have the UN Special Rapporteurs on human rights defenders and judges and lawyers. These, again, you can all download from the internet. That is the wonder of the world in which we live. There's, of course, the problem of having too much information, but it sure as hell beats having too little. The next slide, come on, up you go. Oops, excellent. Again, the information, as I say, is at our fingertips from, as I say, the venerable Amnesty International, which, and it's interesting to look at the role that has evolved for human rights organisations, because Amnesty really spent the first 30 plus years of its life creating that aura of almost saintly credibility that Amnesty had. Well, Amnesty International said, well, you know, in that case, obviously it's beyond dispute. Very, very important that we have organisations that have that level of expertise and objectivity and credibility. But Amnesty never used to do anything really rough and tough in the campaigning world. Not, you know, by comparison with, let's say, GREENPEACE. They were not to be found in major coalitions of campaigners, but they built a terrific reputation, and they continue that terrific reputation. And so when you do read Amnesty International says, it carries a voice of authority. And then you've got relatively small local organisations, such as Frontline Defenders based in Dublin, which has a really impressive report. Again, it's all there on the internet for you to download. And they have, again, a terrific track record, even though they've been in existence a relatively short period of time. I'm going to put in a plug for one of my own organisations, which is the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers. I was on its executive back in the 70s. When I came back from the States, I foolishly went along with the suggestion that I should chair the organisation for a couple of years, and now it's in much safer hands, and it's really building and doing terrific work. Today, in fact, it is publishing the report of the conference that it held last year, and it's a massive achievement, which you will be able to download from the internet as well by going to www.haldane.org, or they also have a specific human rights defenders website there. And the conference they organised last year, we're doing very much the same kind of analysis today. Let me tell you, I think that conferences are wonderful, very useful, very important, but they are not an end in themselves. The important thing about any conference is you meet people who come from various parts of the world, who bring areas of expertise to your doorstep. But unless you go away with a sense of engagement, commitment, and a determination to actually do something, we can't all do something about everything, but all of us can do something about something. And unless you actually walk out of here committed to doing more than you have been doing, then I would say the conference has been a failure, and I don't like being involved in failures. So I just throw that out there, because I think conferences are great, but we shouldn't just congratulate ourselves for having turned up to it. We should think about some of the responses, how to mobilize, for instance, organisation, in terms of a rapid response when you know that somebody is under threat, is receiving death threats. I learned this morning, a colleague of mine in New York contacted me to say that he had spoken recently with a human rights lawyer here in Belfast, who said they are beginning to get the same kind of threats that used to operate back in the 70s, 80s and 90s. And now there are renewed threats from police against certain lawyers here. I find that, I thought we might have passed that stage, but apparently not. How to use UN and regional mechanisms, and how really, I finally broke down and I got on Facebook. I haven't yet learned how to Twitter, and I don't know that I ever will. But even, fogies can get round to using the social media, and the organisation that can come from that is obviously scaring governments big time, hence the need for such massive worldwide surveillance of everything we Twitter and tweet. But I do think we have an organising tool at our fingertips, very literally, that's never existed before, and we have all the greater reason to be more active and more effective using these tools. I'm not going to go through the whole list. Other things that we can do. Don't just wait for the human rights victims to come to you. Go to them. For the last few years, there have been delegations of lawyers going to Colombia, where a horrendous number of people are under attack by various forces, many of them government or government-inspired. In 2008, 2010, 2012, the Colombia Caravana has reported that they have been unable to discern improvements to the problems faced by human rights lawyers and defenders. Their 2012 report found that lawyers, judges, and other actors in the legal system continue to be subject to threats, attacks, and assassinations. A substantial number of these threats originate from paramilitary groups. The justice system still fails adequately to investigate or prosecute perpetrators, resulting in a rate of impunity which, for the most serious crimes, is still measured at 97%. So going and participating in various activities, finding out the information, bringing it back, reporting, spreading the word. These are some of the responsibilities that we have. I've mentioned Lawyers for Lawyers, and there's an A to Z, quite literally, list there of countries where they have lawyers whom they are protecting. They're supporting the cases of 66 lawyers in 20 different countries, and they have received information only recently on 4 murders of lawyers in Colombia since May of this year. I've thrown in next year's Congress of the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, partly because I'm helping to organise it, partly because I want the word to get out therefore, and want to encourage as many of you who have an interest in international law to attend, because we will be covering a massive range of activities of all areas of international law, but particularly we'll be bringing 800 lawyers from over 50 countries on 10 major issues, which will include the protection of lawyers and democratic people's justice. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? Democratic people's justice. I'll leave you to ponder that. What we do by sending delegations, by going to see the people who are facing the threats, is we bring them a level of solidarity, a level of commitment that they would not otherwise experience. Peace Brigades International organised the Alliance for Lawyers at Risk, which is chaired by a very eminent former High Court judge in England. And to me, again, this is extraordinary. The idea of a High Court judge chairing an activist human rights group is a relatively recent concept, and one that, again, gives me some kind of cause for hope for the future. Between 2002 and 2012, that decade, the Colombian Prosecutor General's Office recorded over 5,200 attacks on lawyers, ranging from threats to physical attacks and homicides. 5,200 attacks over a decade. Lawyers' Rights Watch in Canada says at least 12 lawyers have been killed in Colombia in 2013. So far as we know, nobody has been arrested. And bringing it all back home, I am still stunned at the reaction of the British government in relation to the involvement of the state in the assassination of Pat Finucane almost 25 years ago. I'm just going to quote Jane Winter, who used to be head of what was then British Irish Rights Watch. So I think she says what I have felt for many years. Many £million of public money have been spent and many years wasted by successive governments in depriving the Finucane family of the public inquiry they so patently deserve, on the grounds that public inquiries are costly and time-consuming. In the 23 years that I have worked on the Finucane case, I have come to the conclusion that there has been no public inquiry because, despite all that is known now about the Finucane murder, there remains something so shameful that governments are determined to hide it at any cost. Although I cannot, by definition, know what is being kept secret, it is my considered opinion that the most likely matter that remains undisclosed is the level at which there was prior knowledge of the murder and explicit or implicit sanction of it by those in authority. And I would add to that the very high level at which cover-up continued and continues to this day. And if a government is prepared to go to those lengths to hide its involvement in this part of the world, we have to fear even more for our colleagues in other parts of the world. And I can't mention Pat without also, of course, mentioning Rosemary. Because Pat Finucane, who was a friend and colleague, came to New York as a witness for a man who was seeking political asylum from being sent back here. I've never actually had what I would consider a serious threat in 40 years of practicing human rights law. But there was a day back in 1987 when a client of mine was suddenly apprehended on the streets of New York by the FBI and told they were going to send him back to Belfast, where he was convinced, I think quite rightly, that he would be murdered in pretty short order. They asked him, so, which law firm do you want? O'Dwyer and Bernstein, who were the most famous Irish-American human rights lawyers in New York, a wonderful firm. He said, no, I want Richard Harvey. They said, oh, is he still living on 121st Street in Harlem? And that kind of sends a chill through you when you don't think you've got a particularly high profile, and they come back that fast with knowing exactly who your lawyer is and where he lives. Pat came over and testified at we had hearings over a number of years, and he testified about the threats to lawyers. And we talked about it, but he was convinced that that's all they were. They were threats. And this was less than 6 months before he was assassinated. And the following year, I was actually engaged in organising Nelson Mandela's first trip to the United States. And we had a hearing the day that Mandela was due to attend a dinner in New York. And I brought Peter Madden over to testify about the situation in Belfast, where his law partner had been assassinated, and what were the chances for this young man if he were, in fact, sent back to Belfast. Well, two good things came of that. One, Peter got to attend the dinner with Mandela that night, and two, rather more importantly, my client did get political asylum in the United States. But that's the kind of scale of the problem that you face when you're dealing with cases of this nature. In Rosemary's case, excuse me just 1 second, I talk too much, my screen went dark. I want to just talk about the word collusion. And Judge Peter Corey, who summed it up better than most. There cannot be public confidence in any government agency that is guilty of collusion or connivance with regard to serious crimes. Because of the necessity for public confidence in government agencies, the definition of collusion must be reasonably broad when it is applied to such agencies. That is to say, they must not act collusively by ignoring or turning a blind eye to the wrongful acts of their servants or agents, or by supplying information to assist those servants or agents in their wrongful acts, or by encouraging others to commit a wrongful act. The report of the inquiry into the murder of Rosemary Nelson noted a pattern of activity that increased the threat to her, including an assault on her by RUC officers, leaking of intelligence, and threats made to her clients. The report stated there were omissions by state agencies which rendered her more at risk and more vulnerable. The two agencies of the state that had ample knowledge of Rosemary Nelson were the RUC and the NIA. And yet, the government of this day drew some kind of comfort from the fact that the finger was not conclusively pointed at any individual for having caused Rosemary's death. I find that just beyond belief. So, I want to just come to my activist moment, if you like. When the interests of state ignore the public interest, what can you do? And when will you do it? International Human Rights Day is around the corner. Last year, we had an International Day of Action in Solidarity with Human Rights Defenders on the 24th of January. And you may not have met Joe Eyre. It's one of those, when you're in law school, they teach you the value of mnemonics, and they shove all kinds of mnemonics down your throat, and I can still remember some of them. I have no idea what they stand for, but I thought I'd just invent one of my own. Mr. Joe Eyre, let me introduce you to him. Join. And in that sense, I'm sure all of you are members of at least one and probably many organisations committed to human rights. But join Amnesty, GREENPEACE, CAJ, Pat for Newton Centre, Liberty, IADL, the Haldane Society, God bless you. There's strength in numbers, and organising together is always a lot more effective than organising on your own. But organise is what the O in Joe stands for, and organise petitions, organise conferences. Back in 1999, there was the first International Human Rights Defenders Day, and I was at that stage chairing the New York Committee for Truth and Justice for Rosemary Nelson, and we organised a conference in solidarity with human rights defenders. We brought a number of human rights defenders from different parts of the world to that, to highlight the threat then. And that's exactly what this kind of conference is aimed at doing, and I congratulate you for it. Engage is what the E stands for in German. Engage. Go to the embassy of the country concerned. Picket. But don't stop there. Confront the ambassadors. When I came back from Germany back in 1976, you know, obviously the BBC doesn't want to hear what I've got to say, but can we find a way of talking to the Germans themselves? And we asked for an appointment with the ambassador. I think we got to see his number 2. And we had a demonstration outside, and 3 of us went inside, and he sat there, received us very politely, and he said, well, who are all these people? We said, they're all lawyers. And his jaw hit the table. He was used to a bunch of rabble outside, but for some reason they don't automatically think of lawyers as a bunch of rabble. And the thought that lawyers would take their time out to come and picket the German embassy shocked him. I urge you, I don't know whether the Russian Federation has a consulate here in Belfast. If they do, for God's sake, get out and picket it and demand the release of the Arctic 30. In New York, I was engaged for many years in protests outside the British consulate. But eventually I said to my Irish-American friends, you know, it's all very good marching up and down outside the consulate and shouting slogans, but that doesn't get anything across to them inside. Why don't we ask for a meeting? And we then set up a series of meetings which became very productive as the peace process here unrolled. Nearly said unraveled. I think that's not going to happen. It was really instructive to them, again, to recognise that this isn't just the rabble that they can write off and ignore. And let me tell you one other thing it does. The representative of a government, his duty, her duty, first and foremost, is to keep the government informed about the views of the people in the country. You engage with them, they immediately write back home and say, this is what this bunch of lawyers are saying, this is what this organisation is saying. And I had this meeting and these were the points that they made. So it may not appear to be a hugely important thing, but every bit counts that you can do. And this is something that I believe has played, in many instances, a very important role. Engage the consulate. And then, of course, AIR, act, investigate, report. I'm talking too long, so I'm just going to move on. But one of the things you can do by investigating is going to observe trials. And there's nothing that upsets them more than having international observers coming to observe their trials, because that all of a sudden puts them in the spotlight in a way that makes them very uncomfortable. They will frequently, of course, as soon as they know you've come halfway around the world, they will adjourn the trial for some trumped-up reason, but you've still had an impact because you've gone there and you've confused them. I just, again, I'm going to take a quick second on Greenpeace because it's my favourite organisation and I do a lot of work with them. Right now, 28 of their activists, a photographer and a videographer, are being held in custody by the Russian authorities. You know how to get online, you know how to sign a petition, of course. But yesterday I heard from the head of Greenpeace in the Philippines, and it is heartbreaking what has happened there. But almost as heartbreaking are the known causes for massive climate events, such as this monstrous typhoon. As he says, I would urge you to use this moment to remind your governments that every investment in fossil fuels is an investment in death and destruction. The impact of new coal plants being built or new oil fields being developed do not remain in their immediate vicinities. They translate into epic humanitarian disasters and tragedies, as we continue to witness in the Philippines. So, be activists first and foremost. Even join the Pat Finucane Centre and read Anne Cadwallader's book on lethal allies and British collusion in Ireland. You could even join the Law Society. And in Britain, the Law Society of England and Wales has a terrific Lawyers for Lawyers programme, which works in conjunction with Peace Brigade International. As far as I'm aware, I've looked at their website, I don't see any programme of that sort in the Northern Ireland Law Society yet. And so that's your mission, those of you who are lawyers here, is to get involved and put some pressure on your organisations to move things forward. I have just been given the two fingers sign, which I think was a polite one, by our organisers, and I think it just means 2 minutes. Fortunately, I've come to the end of what I have to say, but I am really looking forward to hearing from the experts from each of the regions. And once again, I congratulate the organisers on putting together what I think is an extremely important